In 1996, Jewel Jen Buskin, also known as Julie, was 21 years old and a resident of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Julie grew up in Benton, Arkansas, but she relocated to Norman, Oklahoma, to attend college. She had a job on the golf course at the university. Julie had already completed the first 2 years of her bachelor's program in dance. Julie had dreams of opening a dancing studio and instructing young students after she graduated from college. It was said that Julie was well liked in school and had many acquaintances. She possessed a wealth of skills as well. After a long day of work at the golf course, Julie and her buddy Ryan James spent the evening of December 19, 1996, at Ryan's grandparents' house. They had supper, then watched a film. The two also agreed to meet the following day for lunch. After spending the evening with his grandparents, Julie went out to meet up with her other friends. At one of their residences, Julie and her pals played Monopoly and exchanged holiday presents. Julie said her farewells as she was leaving the next day to return to her hometown. She had just finished her current college semester. Megan, her roommate, was there as well. The night before, Julie assured Megan that she would drive her to the Will Rogers Airport at 5 in the morning. It was determined that Julie and Megan would stay up all night. At around 2 in the morning, they left the friend's place and headed to a restaurant called The Kettle. Julie and Megan finished up and then drove to the gas station to fill up and grab a cappuccino. They got back to their apartment at around 3:00 a.m. to retrieve Megan's things. Around 4:30 a.m., the two departed the residence once more, this time in the direction of the airport. They traveled there in a quarter of an hour. Megan watched as Julie drove away from the airport in her Red Eagle Summit after dropping her off. At Julie's Dublin West apartment complex at 5:30 a.m., residents reported hearing a woman's terrified screams, and someone dialed 911 to report the incident.
Norman 911.
Yes, we were just sleeping, and my wife heard a really strange, like a really awful scream from our parking lot of our apartment complex.
Do you see anything outside?
No, I'm kind of afraid to go outside, actually.
Ryan James showed up at Julie's place for their lunch date a few hours later, as planned. There was no sign of Julie anywhere, but her car had also gone missing. Afterward, Ryan filed a missing persons report for her. Julie's parents visited her soon afterward. They drove from Arkansas to help Julie move back home. As opposed to their daughter, they found police officers who told them Julie had gone missing. Approximately 15 miles from her apartment, Julie Buskin's body was discovered on the shore of a lake 12 hours after she vanished. She had a pair of shoelaces tying her hands behind her back, and she was submerged in water up to her waist. Julie had been shot with a single gunshot. The bullet that struck the back of her head made direct contact with her skull. Some of the evidence suggested she had been assaulted as well. By the water, a possible piece of evidence was discovered by investigators in the sand close to where Julie's body was located. 2 pairs of footsteps led down to the lake, but only one set came back. Julie owned one pair, while the killer was thought to have owned the other set. The footprint was examined, and after speaking with Nike, it was concluded that it was consistent with a pair of Nike Air 2 running shoes, men's size 9. 20 feet from Julie's body, police discovered a pink leotard with the initials GB twisted up inside. In this case, Julie owned it. The leotard was saved because it contained male DNA and will be useful in the future when DNA technology is more developed. Julie was killed by a single .22 caliber gunshot, according to the autopsy. The gun used was of a very particular type. However, I'll get into that in greater detail later. Julie Buskin had a large number of university friends, so detectives set out to interview as many of them as possible. They were hoping for some kind of assistance, but nobody was able to help. No one had a personal grudge against Julie, and she never experienced any heartbreaking romantic failures. Julie's flat was found by the police to be in pristine condition. No indications of a struggle could be found. Julie's car was located in an apartment complex that was only a block away from her home. The sand in the car matched the red sand on the shore of the lake where Julie's body was discovered. Researchers found this to be highly unusual. The question is why Julie's kidnapper would take her life at the lake and then return her automobile to a spot that's almost identical to where she was taken. Unfortunately, the car did not have any suspicious hairs, fibers, or prints. There was also no sign that a fight had broken out. Julie's phone had disappeared. Investigators requested her phone records to see if any leads might be uncovered. According to her cell phone records, someone called her twice after she passed away. 2 of the calls were to a number that was currently not in operation, while the third was for a weather report, even though there were leads and a reward of $70,000. For a brief time, there were no major developments, and the case became cold. Then, a man called the cops a month after Julie's life ended. He said that on the night Julie was taken from her home, a car similar to hers pulled out in front of him, and they came dangerously close to colliding. That was close to the lake. The witness followed Julie's car for 5 miles because he wanted to talk to the driver. The vehicle's driver kept checking their reflection in the rearview mirror for the witness and then drove off. After catching a glimpse of the driver's face, the eyewitness was tasked with providing a detailed description to the police. This is a drawing of the young man who was seen leaving the lake in Julie's vehicle. He seemed like he could have been a college student. He had long black hair, a muscular frame, and was probably Hispanic. The Oklahoma media played the composite sketch several times. Nobody knew who he was. There were no new leads in the case for 4.5 years. A female inmate at the Oklahoma County Jail wrote a letter to the police. She speculated that a long-lost friend might be responsible for Julie's death. Dennis Sturmer was 23 at the time. Sturmer worked in construction and had never been convicted of a crime. But he resembled the composite sketch and only resided 4 blocks away from Julie's apartment at the time of the incident. Sturmer was uncooperative and would not give an interview or a DNA sample. In order to legally obtain his DNA, police needed a warrant. The DNA profile he provided closely matched the evidence collected from the leotard at the scene. Very, very close does not constitute a match, and he was no longer a suspect. The only male sibling Sturmer had left was his brother. This must have been him, right? It looked like the 5-year-old cold case might be solved at last. However, there was a twist. His siblings' DNA didn't match. The trail became cold again. The parents of Julie had to face the reality that they might not survive to see justice done. Researchers were dead set against this happening and made an exhaustive effort to obtain DNA from every male Julie had ever met. No suitable males were found after testing over 200 men. The situation looked like it might never be resolved. Anthony Castillo Sanchez was arrested for abusing his girlfriend 6 years after Julie's murder. Sanchez was required to provide a DNA sample to authorities after his detention. Sanchez's history was intriguing to detectives because he lived only a mile from Julie's place. A diary kept by one of Sanchez's girlfriends during the month Julie was killed was presented to the police. Anthony surprised her with a new pair of Nike running shoes, then went out and bought himself a matching pair, as she wrote about in her diary. Sanchez's shoe size was a 9. At the very least, this established that Sanchez had a pair of sneakers by the same manufacturer and in the same size as the offender. One of Anthony's ex-girlfriends had a mobile phone number that differed by a single digit from the one dialed on Julie's dead phone. Sanchez could have tried to call the ex from memory but dialed the wrong number. Sanchez and his father had a peculiar practice of shooting at the walls of the rental house with a .22 caliber gun. A bullet was recovered by investigators from inside the residence. The gun used to shoot Julie was identified as the source of the bullet. The particular grooves found on the rounds were only created by 6 manufacturers of .22 caliber rifles. In 2004, the male DNA detected on Julie's leotard was compared to that of Anthony Sanchez. This was, of course, a match. Sanchez was just a teenager when he committed the crime. It is interesting to think about the fact that if he had dialed the correct number on Julie's phone, he would have been caught instantly. In 2006, Anthony Castillo Sanchez was found guilty. It was agreed that he would die as punishment for his crime. Recently, in March of the year 2023, despite his conviction, Sanchez was still appealing. He said it was actually his father who had committed the crime, not him. Glenn Sanchez, his father, killed himself in April 2022 and told his partner that it was him all along. But investigators had already looked into the possibility that the DNA did belong to Glenn Sanchez, and they found that it did not. For Caucasians, the chance that the match is a mistake is 1 in 200 quadrillion. For African Americans, it's 1 in 20 quintillion. And for Southwest Hispanics, it's 1 in 94 quadrillion. According to the legal papers on September 21, 2023, Anthony Sanchez is scheduled to be put to death.